can you give us a rundown of the current state of our relations with the U.S.?
Well, I think President Duterte ended his term with on a high note as far as our U.S.-Philippine relations is concerned. We all know that we went through a number of bumps. Well, I wouldn't even bump. Some of them were mountains. But at the end of the day, I think after the president reinstated the VFA, the United States has become a stronger partner. But what's important, Marichu, is that because of President Duterte's style of foreign relations, I think we have now come to a certain level of a relationship with the United States that was described by Secretary Austin, the Defense Secretary of the United States, Lloyd Austin, when he ended his meeting with the president by saying that we cannot and should not take our allies for granted. And that is exactly where we want our relationship to be with the United States. We will not take them for granted, but they should not take us for granted too. And so I think that that kind of relationship is now, in my view, at its best since I took over as Philippine ambassador to the United States.
And that's good to hear, sir, because I know for a fact that it was only under President Duterte that we were finally able to bring back the Balangiga bills that past presidents tried to bring here, and it was him who was able to bring it back to the Philippines, sir.
That's absolutely true, Marichu. I think that's one thing that President Duterte has achieved, that is a legacy to his presidency, because he was very clear that those bells are ours. They should return it to us before he would even begin to talk about our relationship with the United States. And I think that was clearly understood by the administration of then President Trump. And so Secretary Mathis, that whole episode, I was a witness to it, and I was very proud to be the ambassador then, because Secretary Mathis, the Defense Secretary then, had talked to us and said that he would do whatever he can to get those bells back here. And we finally got it back after more than 100 years. And I'll tell you, Marichu, kita kay Presidente noon, kay President Duterte, but right after, remember the ceremony in Balangiga, President Duterte walked to the plaza where there was a memorial of those who died in 1901. He was touching the names of those that were there. He was quietly just touching them. And then he looked, and I saw him, he had tears in his eyes. Talagang he was very emotional about it. And that to me was one of those very, very memorable moments during the presidency of President Duterte.
Yes, and I agree with you with that. But at the start of the Duterte administration, as you said, we hit the mountain, not the bumps. When the issue of human rights came up, and it rolled, and it spun into really serious, almost breaking the Philippine-U.S. relations. And to your credit, you just inherited it and you ironed it out through the years, the past 2 years that you've been the ambassador. So how did you do it?
Well, I wouldn't really take credit for it. I think marami rin tumulong doon. We have our American friends who also helped tremendously in the effort. And, this was really started during the time of then Ambassador Raul Rabe, and it carried on. But the real problem really was the law that the United States had on what they call the war articles. Parang may law there that you cannot just simply bring back all of these things. For some reason, this was a law that was enacted many years ago, right after World War I or II.
Okay.
So this is what they call the National Defense Act. So we had friends like Henry Howard, who is our honorary consul in Florida, who's a very fairly wealthy businessman. He contracted a law firm to help us in changing the law, or at least making the law suitable to allowing the Defense Secretary of the United States to sign off and allowing the return of what they call war spoils, the spoils of war,
Yeah.
like the Balagiga bells.
Yeah. And I thought you were going to talk about the human rights issue. So I was just trying to get inputs from you, how you were able to iron out those kinks on the human rights issue.
But the human rights issue has always been around. They've been talking about this even as far back as during the time of President Marcos Sr.,
Yeah.
even during the time of Mrs. Aquino, and all the way up to President Duterte. We've had the human rights issues. Like most countries, we have a continuing problem with the left. And so there is a back and forth type of accusations being made.
Yeah.
President Duterte said maraming mga sundalo natin pinapatay at they're being killed also. And how come there are no human rights that are being said about that?
Yeah.
So, but at the end of the day, the human rights issues, we've addressed that by simply having our authorities investigate many of these issues, which we've been giving reports to, especially to the U.S. Congress. But the more important one, we sponsored a resolution at the United Nations, of which we're asking the United States to be a member of, which is the United Nations Council for Human Rights.
Okay.
We were part of that. And this council is going to be the one that will oversee human rights violations all over the world, and not the National Court in Hague. Because we look at that as parang there's a lot of politics involved in that one. Even the United States is not a member of the ICC. So we're that the United Nations be the venue for all of these accusations of human rights.
Okay. So that's what's the status now of that Philippine-led resolution in the UN?
Well, we're getting a lot of countries that are supporting it, and we're hoping that it will be passed as a resolution and implemented by the United Nations. And so I think in the next General Assembly of the United Nations, we will push that as part of our agenda in pushing for our relationship with the world, that we are a rules-based country, like all countries.